Just went live so people can join us. Thanks to everyone that's joined us so far. We'll get started in just a moment.
Hi, everybody. I want to thank all of you for coming today to our first COVID Busters and Collaborative Solutions presentation. I want to start by introducing Marta as one of our panelists. Marta is the ultimate neutral financial professional and facilitator. She also happens to be a mediator and a lawyer, and she holds so many licenses and degrees that they're just too numerous to list during this program. It would take up the whole program. She is the past president of CFLI, and in her spare time, she continues to volunteer for this organization and countless hours to FACP and many others. And for all of us that know Marta, we also know she's also a warrior, tackling everything on her plate with gusto and bravery.
Susan, that was really nice. It's my pleasure to introduce you as my dear friend and colleague. Susan is an amazing family law lawyer. She's been concentrated in family law dependency and advocacy for children for more than 25 years. She started her career in family law litigation in New York, and when she moved to Miami, she became a Florida Supreme Court family mediator, and she uses the divorce without war process to mediate marital dissolutions. She now also works on collaborative family law. Her belief is that she's really committed to a peaceful platform for divorce resolution through mediation and the collaborative process. She is amazing. She can put two people that are ends of the room and by the end of the conversation where you think there's no way they can resolve this situation, she can get them to yes. And in fact, I've seen them hug on the way out the door. A fun fact about Susan is that she has had her own radio show in college days, and she has a wicked sense of humor. In getting ready for this seminar, I've had the pleasure of meeting a wonderful new colleague and buddy, Dr. Candice Saketkoo. She is a licensed psychologist with 2 doctoral degrees. She's had nearly 30 years of clinical experience and worked in various medical, surgical, and psychiatric hospitals, including a maximum security state prison as a director of mental health. Her specialties are in adult and geriatric clinical psychology, neuropsychology, behavioral medicine, rehab psychology, and health psychology. She's a Florida Supreme Court certified family mediator, and she's also a collaborative law neutral facilitator. She loves Pilates and the Peloton, and her leaderboard name says it all. Psych on a Bike, Florida. I expect to see people using it. She's also had a brief stint on the radio. So welcome to these 2 extremely distinguished colleagues and panelists. And now, Candice, I turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. It's such a heartfelt introduction. Thank you. And thank you all for coming. So I was actually, being that I did used to work in radio, I was actually going to start this whole webinar out by playing the theme from Ghostbusters. But then I figured, there's probably a mental health professional on this call. And I figured, I probably better not, because they might feel inclined to Baker-act me. So I nixed that idea. So I then was thinking, well, look at the 3 of us. We really are the new and improved Threes Company. You have a mega woman warrior for a brunette. You have a powerhouse of a redhead. And I'm going to leave all of your conclusions about the blonde until after the phone call. So let's go ahead and get started. I just want to explain to you how we're going to do this format. I'm going to present to you a fact pattern. And what we would like for you to do is take some notes and, think about things that stick out for you, some potential issues, some facts, because what we will do in a little bit after we present the fact pattern, we're going to open this up to a meeting forum. So so sorry, but we are going to ask you to turn on your videos. So if you are undressed, we kindly ask that you please don't stumble over the family cat or the family dog and get yourself dressed. We're going to hold off on asking you to open your mics when we open up to the meeting forum, because we really don't want any family brawls. We'll try to call on everybody because we would like to engage in an active discussion. So here we go with the fact pattern. We have Lucy and Larry, and guess what? They were married. Yes, they were. They divorced in 2017, and they did reach a collaborative marriage settlement agreement. They have 2 children, Sarah, who is age 8, and Stephen, who is age 10. During the pandemic, Lucy has been working from home. Lucy is a pharmaceutical rep, and she earns $100,000 per year. Larry works in marketing for a cruise line and has taken a 30% pay cut during the pandemic. Larry's salary was reduced from $150,000 to $100,000. Larry is also now working from home. The parties enjoy 50-50 timeshare. Larry's mother lives in close proximity and is available to care for the minor children during Larry's timeshare. Lucy lives with her partner of 3 years. That would be Lisa. Other than Lisa, Lucy does not have anyone to care for the children during her timeshare. Larry objects to Lucy hiring any third-party caregivers. Larry has agreed to have the children be enrolled in after-school care and summer camp, which has previously given Lucy some work flexibility during her timeshare. So, now let's get to summer of 2020. For those of you who need any additional orientation, that would be this summer. The few summer programs available during COVID only allow full-time campers. Larry cannot afford to contribute his 65% share of the full camp program due to his diminished income. Larry does not trust Lucy's judgment to select a third-party caregiver and objects to Lisa, who works part-time and has a flexible work schedule to care for the children. Lucy cannot properly work from home while the children are at home without supervision or being occupied in some way. Dun dun! The parties returned to the collaborative process to address these issues. Take a deep breath, process some of it because more is to come. Okay. Lucy and Larry quickly learned that they have blatant differences in perspectives regarding COVID-19. Lucy is concerned about sending the children to any camp. Larry believes that COVID-19 is a, quote, hoax and made to believe that, quote, it's nothing more than a hype, unquote. He is adamant that the children would be safe at camp and under the care of a counselor rather than Lisa or someone else that Lucy may hire. On repeated occasions, Larry has intimated that the children might be, quote, influenced, unquote, by Lisa and their, quote, lifestyle, unquote. Lucy and Larry have been contacted, furthermore, by the children's local public school to discuss the likelihood of having their children return this fall. Lucy would prefer to homeschool their children under the state of Florida program. Larry is adamant about having the children return to school. He is concerned about them falling academically behind. In a pre-brief meeting, Lucy's attorney discloses that he is immune compromised, and he is very fearful about leaving his home. Marta, you're up.
Thank you. So, given everything we've talked about, this interesting set of circumstances, I'm sure that most of us have seen some or all of these in our current cases. And so what we'd like to do here is to work together as a group to option build to find solutions to the following issues. The first one is differences in the beliefs about the pandemic. Also, what to do about the professional team beliefs about the pandemic. Impact to the collaborative marital settlement agreement on post-resolution COVID issues. The financial impact of COVID on employment. Summer camp and aftercare management. What to do about next year's school arrangements during COVID. And finally, any other potential financial impacts related to COVID that we can identify. So at this point, what we'd like to do is open up the discussion to everyone and let's share our thoughts about where we go from here. We thought that that was infinitely more fascinating than hearing us three list everything that could possibly be here.
So just for a moment, I want to thank Candice and Marta for outlining such an interesting fact pattern, one that's actually very personal to me because I was involved in one very similar, which of course generates all these ideas. I'm sure all of us have had some of these issues in our cases. And we're going to talk in more detail about Lucy, Larry, and their two children and the issues that have arisen for this summer and going forward. I want everyone to meet Eric Sachs, who's sometimes known as MC Sachs, who's here with us today. He's helping our collaborative group, CFLI, and he's working in so many platforms to help advance collaborative and move the ball forward. He's going to help us switch the format from meeting mode to meeting mode, from webinar mode. And at that point, we're going to ask all of you again to mute your mic, unmute your mics when you want to speak to the group, but to keep them muted at other times. And our goal is to engage in a dynamic discussion and explore ideas together about how we as collaborative professionals can help Larry and Lucy resolve these issues, keeping in mind the underlying emotional, financial, and legal issues that are part of this fact pattern. So right now, we're going to welcome all comments.
So everyone should have the ability to unmute their microphones. I'm not sure if we're going to have the ability to have people turn their cameras on, but if people want to share comments, they can do that. Just let us know in the chat that you have a comment, and we can start calling on people to have a discussion.
Eric, we're not able to see them raise their hand, or they have to just do it through the chat?
If they can raise their hand, they can do it through like the raise their hand feature as well. I don't believe that we can ask, unless one of the participants wants to try, I don't have the ability to ask them to turn their camera on. It does look like we do have a comment from Rhonda Fuchs, if we want to go there first. Let her start us off.
Okay, Rhonda, hit it.
Thank you, three, for putting this together. Well, I think the first question is about the differences of their views on this pandemic. I mean, I think we see as a world there, and especially our country, many, or at least two different views of this virus. But one of the things that we spoke about in the webinar on empathy was about looking at both perspectives, and that both of them are valid, even if you believe or you don't believe it's a hoax or it's not, or it's whatever it is, just to open up the discussion about their views, their perspective, and why they have their fears and anxieties about having their kids in a camp or not, or having their kids go back to school or not. Because unless we can put them all on the table and say, okay, your perspective is valid, I may not agree, but that's your perspective, we really can't get the conversation going. And then I think it's up to the team to really negotiate and help facilitate that conversation.
Rhonda, did you happen to note in the fact pattern too that one of the professionals on the team has a viewpoint also towards the pandemic, and how might you handle that?
Well, that's an important pre-brief. And again, we can only facilitate the conversation in the most neutral way, even with the attorneys. I think that's all we can do as a team, is to guide, but not impose our own perspectives. It's between the two of them. We're not parenting their kids. We're not taking them to camp. We're not responsible if they catch the virus or not. So I think we as professionals need to put our personal feelings aside and try to just have the two of them dialogue and guide them in that.
Great, so you'd address that in the pre-brief. Any other, from the mental health perspective, want to address some of the other issues that might be going on here? Candice?
Well, one thing that strikes me as we were going through this is what is behind Larry's lack of trust toward not just Lucy's ability to hire a third-party caregiver, but what's behind the lack of trust in Lisa. Is there anything that we need to be concerned about with regard to the safety of the children? Are there any issues with regard to her ability to care for the children? What is driving this? Is there a control issue that's behind this? Are there any concerns with regard to Lucy being a caregiver? Has that changed since the initial collaborative marriage settlement agreement? These are things that we need to look into to see what has changed, other than the presence of this pandemic that no one has experienced in their lifetime. What has changed during that time frame that is bringing them back to this process?
So from a legal perspective, you talk about change. I'd like to hear from some of the lawyers, but I'll chime in here, is that perhaps it was okay at some point when they entered into this agreement that there were not third-party caregivers, and they were able to manage through aftercare, summer camp programs, and whatever way they did through their work experience and flexibility. But it's that change that's bringing them to the table, and that change from a legal perspective that might be a basis for a modification. And so, we need to explore with them what are the circumstances that would warrant a change from what they agreed to in their agreement. Any other lawyers want to speak to that issue? Nobody's raising their hand. Okay, we have some hand
Raised hands.
We do have a couple hands that just went up. Jeff Wasserman, why don't you go ahead and give your comment?
All right. Modifications from a legal perspective are based upon material, unanticipated changes of circumstance. Certainly COVID-19 is unanticipated, but it's not permanent, which is another condition for a legal modification. It doesn't sound as if that this is a case for a modification. I think it's a matter of trying to get the parties to work together to come to solutions that will continue until the COVID-19 is behind us and they can get back to a more normal situation.
If I can also just ask you, Jeff, in light of there being a partner involved that hasn't previously been involved, who has the ability to partake in watching the children, but Larry, the father, having an issue with that, would you be inclined to think that it's more than simply a COVID-19 issue? This is a person, this is a partner who has been, a part of Lucy's life for 3 years, and they've been living together. So what would you think about that in relation to everything else?
Well, that's not a change of circumstance, because if they've been living together for 3 years, both of the children have had some kind of a relationship with Lisa. And, there's nothing new there. I think it's a matter of exploring what's really behind Larry's concern about Lisa being a caretaker for the children, other than the fact that, there may be some obvious prejudices that he may have. And as long as you can confine it to what is in the best interest of the children, and are they going to be harmed by this woman who they've known for the last 3 years and who is not new in their lives, let him identify how it's going to be harmful to the children. And if he can't, I think the team has got to discuss the fact that unless there is a demonstration of harm, why shouldn't she be the obvious caretaker?
And
when we option build, we look at that and we see the impact of Lisa and explore that as an option. And when we look to other options, perhaps we want to look to some of the financial implications of the other options, and maybe we can talk a little bit about that. I think the fact pattern outlined that Larry, we can assume, was obligated to 65% contribution to summer camp and activities, so forth. And he has stated for this summer, at least, that he is not able to contribute at that level. And so we have to look at other options and their financial impact. Does anybody want to speak to that?
I would also, if I may, I'd like to, Allison Hockman had mentioned in the comment section that she thinks the knowledge regarding Larry's objections to Lucy and or Lisa caregiving is key to resolve the matters. Allison, would you like to open your mic and expand upon that? Because I saw you've been patiently waiting.
Well, I am open, aren't I? Okay.
Yes,
you
go
are.
ahead.
I think it just tails into what Jeffrey was saying. I mean, even if it's just pure control or pure prejudice, then that is an issue for the team. But once you find that out, and if there is not any indications of Lucy or Lisa in their caregiving styles, other than just being maybe different than Larry or his mom, the matter comes down to practicalities. What are we doing with these children this summer? Larry can't afford it. What does he suggest? What does Larry suggest that should happen to them for the summer? Just a simple little issue of just this summer.
How do we option build on that, Marta?
Well, I think that you've got to start taking a look at what they realistically can afford, what time frames and are available to them with the solutions that they can afford, and that there are definite pros and cons to every one of them. And I think that putting the family on the table as a caregiver is an option. And so I think you've got to look at everyone and then sit back and see if you can peel back the discomfort that Larry has about the situation. I think one more thing that comes up I want to emphasize.
Rosemary, mute your mic off.
Okay,
Yeah.
so thank you. So is that there's an issue that they have up front, which is one believes that going out in the world and being unprotected is the action to have, and the other parent doesn't share that belief. And so you have an issue with a potential impact to health that you have to reconcile, which I think is a big concern. And the other thing is it's a learning opportunity for the children, because different things happen at different people's houses because they have different beliefs. And so long as the children are healthy and protected, it probably is okay that mom and dad have different rules. I don't know if people have seen this in their cases thus far. I mean, I can tell you in one case I dealt with, we had mom who was adamant that there had to be massive social distancing, and if dad was going to come over and take them out, they had to wear masks and socially distance and everything, particularly because dad was involved in healthcare. So therefore, even though he wasn't directly involved in patient care, particularly with COVID-19 patients, he was involved in handling tissue samples that could be infected, and therefore it's a real concern. And how does dad translate that into safe behaviors that doesn't impact the kids? In that particular case, dad was a medical professional and understood the risk and could reconcile his behaviors to having to accommodate some. Here you have two people that aren't in either of those positions and could be operating from a position of this is a belief and it may not be resident in fact. So I'll tell you one thing that they did was when they got to a point where, and both of these people were eventually involved in the medical field, that they couldn't agree, they agreed to bring in an expert in epidemiology to break the tie. And that way, it wasn't a debate between mom and dad in the eyes of older kids. Here, I think the issue is even a little bit more sensitive because these are younger kids. And honestly, I mean, I believe they have some awareness, but they don't have the level of awareness or understanding of the complexities that could be required to be put in place to protect them. So I do think that having a third party that either they contact or they agree that could take the place of a logjam was actually a great way to solve that problem. How have other people solved those types of problems in their cases? Because I think that would be helpful in order to do the brainstorming and the option building that needs to be done. What have other people seen?
Marta, what kind of procedures did they put in place to resolve that besides the neutral third party? I mean, I'm curious to know.
Well, I'll give, without going through name, date, and serial number, the first thing they did was the husband got frequently tested. Happened to be because he was concerned about catching it himself and giving it to other people, which, you know, if you don't have somebody who's willing to go through that, I don't know if anybody's had the pleasure, but it's really it's not a pleasant test, okay? So I can't imagine the people that have agreed to go through it every day. But what this father agreed to do was he was working in cycles of every 2 weeks, being on and off with respect to visiting. And what he would do at the beginning of his, or the end of his 2-week period, is he would be tested before he would pick up the children, so that everybody had the comfort to know that he wasn't testing positive, because the concern was being asymptomatic and not knowing, you know, had I been in contact with somebody or a tissue sample that caused me to be positive. So assuming that was the case, then he agreed that during the time period he had the kids, he would not be working in a situation where he was proximate to those samples and to COVID-19 contact. So, and then that cycle would start again afterwards, and that's how they worked it out. Mom's job with respect to healthcare was remote. So she did not get in contact with people, but mom had had cancer, and therefore mom was concerned about her own immunity, not only for the children, but if the children came home and were sick, she might get a more severe case. So that's how they managed through that. They had this 2-week cycle and did that, and that was all, you know, agreed to. And then, you know, if for some reason he couldn't see the kids because he was sick, they made an accommodation in the visitation schedule to provide for that on the back end when all this stuff was over, so that neither parent, no matter what happened, would quote unquote miss out from having had the same time period that they had planned for the kids.
So Marta, what you just did really was a lot of option building. You put in safeguards, and it could even go so far as to write them into an addendum or a new agreement. We see this all the time in family cases. We have fears on the part of one parent or another, where they're going to travel, whether they're going to let the children swim, you know, differences in parenting styles that now are showing up through this pandemic, through how each person deals with COVID. And, you know, my inclination is the tendency is to sort of accommodate the more fearful person, put the issues on the table, address them, and even have some agreements and some understandings about accommodating those. And you just addressed that. There are things that we can do, testing things and other ways that we can speak to those fears. Back to this fact pattern, let's assume for the moment that mom was able to get through her fears, recognizing that she has to work at home, that the children have to find some way to either attend camp or be cared for by somebody, whether it be Lisa or a third party. And let's assume for the moment that mom could get through the fear of allowing them to be in a public setting, a camp setting. How can we option build on Larry's statement that he can't afford his 65% share? How do we start to explore ways to get through the financial impact? And you want to speak to that, Marta, or anybody else want to raise their hand?
Anybody else want to do that? I mean, you know, Patricia, you might have some ideas and thoughts that would be worth talking about.
Patricia, are you there?
As much as the three of us love each other, we just would love to hear the voices of others.
Yes.
Right.
So we're hoping to have this be an engaging conversation, because many of us have come across cases in which we're faced with things we've never seen before. You know, I'm now starting to write provisions for pandemics in my parenting plans. Whoever thought that that would be a necessity? So would somebody like to
I
address?
see Patricia's raising her
Patricia's
hand.
opened up here, so.
Awesome.
Okay.
Patricia.
All right, thank you. So I'm trying to remember all the different, items in the fact pattern, but it seems to me that Larry is putting Lucy in a very difficult position. It's understandable if his income has been reduced by $50,000 and he says he can't pay for a share of camp. I mean, that's very possible. But then it's putting a huge burden on Lucy because either she pays for camp in full and decides that it's okay to send them there, or she works at home. But she's told us that she can't work from home without some help with the children.
Right.
And when Larry doesn't like for Lisa to help, nor does he like for any outside caregivers, he's really putting Lucy in a very difficult position, to be able to figure out what to do here. So, I mean, I'm thinking they just have to, if they're looking at different options, financially, if it's not going to work financially for them to go to camp, I'm hoping some options could be tossed out to Larry that he needs to, we hope, would reconsider maybe his stance on other caretakers to help Lucy out so she can still work. Because if she's not working, that's not helping anyone either. So I'm just hoping that he would reconsider maybe letting Lisa help out more or other caretakers. And also, I think maybe Candice brought it up, or someone brought it up earlier, to really explore why he objects so much to those people being caregivers and helping Lucy out, and really explore that issue.
So I think you made some very good points. One thing that you mentioned is that he said he couldn't contribute to summer camp. And I think what we might explore, and this is what's the beauty of collaborative, is perhaps he's willing to make a contribution that doesn't look like 65%, but there's some other contribution that he's willing to make that could make it a go for summer camp. There's other options here other than 65%, even though in a litigated case, you might say that's what you agreed to and that's what I'm holding you to. Getting into the court process now is impossible. These people, chose collaborative. And so let's not look to the detail of the agreement. Let's find out perhaps from Larry what he can contribute. Perhaps it's a 50-50 split if we can get Lucy to agree that camp is safe enough and Larry to agree to some contribution that doesn't look like 65%. Maybe that's where we start to option build. I see Bette has her hand up. Bette?
Okay, so did I not hear some of the facts? Did I hear that Larry was somewhat immune compromised?
It's his lawyer.
Lucy's attorney is immune compromised, and he is very fearful about leaving his home. That's Lucy's attorney.
So I don't believe any of this has to do with Larry's fears. He had these fears beforehand, and I think he and the partner.
No, he's not the one with the partner.
Oh no, he and Lisa. I'm saying he and Lisa.
Lucy. Lucy is the ex-wife. Lisa is Lucy's partner.
So Larry and Lisa need to spend the day together with the children to determine, as Lisa goes through the day with the children, what Larry's concerns are so that she could rectify those issues. They could spend a morning together or whatever, and maybe come back to the team and understand a little bit better whether this is some, homosexuality is not transmitted like COVID, okay? So he has to really understand this and be honest with himself as to what his fear is here. And we're talking about a couple of weeks. I don't think anything is going to happen, but his concerns may be valid. I don't know who this person is. And if he then could probably, but if he spent 3 hours, maybe he could articulate that better.
It's a great idea.
It really is. That is an out of the box idea.
Right.
Got some other people that want to speak. I think Rhonda has her hand up, and I know that Allison made a comment as well.
Well, I think
Rhonda?
I get the flavor that this is not so COVID as the primary. You already have an idea how he thinks if he's calling it a hoax. But I think that I would want to, as a facilitator, have Lucy and Larry come in or Zoom in and really try to look at that and let, again, their perspectives, not just on the virus, but on a gay partnership, on, we don't know what his mother is influencing him by. We just don't know I don't feel I know enough of the background, but I certainly would want to bring them in and have a discussion with them and see if this is going back further historically, or this is just to, March 2020. The flavor to me is it's not just the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Rhonda, you raised a good point that COVID maybe brought about and peeled back the layers that were already there. Mm-hmm. And it brings to my mind that we as professionals, and sometimes do this where we kick the can down the road. And here in this particular fact pattern, we have parties that resolve their matter without any understanding of the need for a third-party caregiver and how that would look, and when that would have to be resolved. They relied on aftercare, Larry's mother, and flexibility in their schedules. But perhaps as professionals, we need to sort of explore this during the process because it's inevitable. Now it was brought about by a COVID issue because it's just impractical in their circumstances. But, I think you're right that it was there. It's not really a COVID issue. It's just that was the underpinning for some new issues to arise.
And is it a control issue? Is it that COVID-19 became the identified issue when in reality, it's just the beginning of the onion being peeled?
True.
I'd like to go back and talk a little bit more about the finances, because we talked about the fact that there are many ways to peel back the onion. And here, Larry may want to participate. He may want to, he may not be able to afford what he's got, but I think the question of what can he do? And if he can't do it all now, and, we come back to mom turning around and saying, all right, I'll put up the money. Is there a way that then she gets compensated back so that they get back to the same state if in fact his reduction in pay is a temporary one? So, I think that you explore that and you can come up with several what if scenarios that would permit them to be in a position to have some type of understanding of what funds are available. Another alternative that I think is in the line of what the out-of-box thinking that Bette was talking about on the caretaking side is maybe if mom does things so well, maybe mom sits down with them as well and talks about the activities that she does that makes time with her so special. And perhaps Lisa turns around and listens to that and processes that and honors some of those behaviors as well, that makes the change in caregiver not so abrupt for him.
What I think is very interesting is that our perspectives on the solution sometimes help us to option build. So what Bette suggested never occurred to me, but it seems like she's coming from this very practical place, which is that Lisa, who's already in the home, knows the kids and is available and costs no money, is the most obvious solution. So let's work on that one. And get Larry to see that that's a really good solution by putting him in the company of Lisa and watching that happen, which was brilliant. And that's where sort of the issue of the lawyer having worries about his own health issues is probably inclined to come up with solutions that don't involve going to summer camp. Maybe not come from encouraging his client to contribute more and meet in the middle with Larry and resolve it from the financial perspective. So we have to explore our own sort of ideas about the solutions as we approach option building, which is why it's great to work on a team, because we have different ideas, different perspectives, and different solutions.
So how would you facilitate something like that happening? You would say to them, go off and be with the kids at the house? Or would it require having perhaps the mental health professional participate? Or how would something like that work?
Should we open that up and ask?
Yes. We need the facilitators to help us with this one.
Yep. How do you facilitate that type of an activity between two people that may feel really uncomfortable with being with each other? And the kids, do they meet first? I mean, I don't know.
Rhonda's got
Rhonda raised her hand. Rhonda, do you want to?
Facilitators on because I'm talking a lot. But this case speaks to me, this fact pattern. I think we have to be really careful of, and Bette, I really like your idea too, and that is the out of the box, but I think it needs to be facilitated. So we need to make sure that there's communication. We need to make sure that we understand Lucy and Larry. We may need to make sure we understand Lucy and Lisa, and maybe the three of them get on or come to a Zoom meeting. It's hard to say meeting now, but I think this cannot just be a runaway train, but it needs to be facilitated and managed by the team with whatever options or combinations come up. I mean, again, we don't know the history of this relationship of Larry, how he feels about Lisa and Lucy. Were they having an affair before the divorce? Was she the cause of it? I don't think you said that in the fact pattern. So I think there's a history here that is really important to know.
Allison, you also raised in the chat an interesting solution. You want to address that with everyone? Allison, are you with us?
I'm with you. I'm just muted.
Okay, good. You raised an option about Larry's mom I'd like you to talk about.
Another option. I mean, as Lisa is the obvious solution to take care of the kids when Lucy is working, I mean, Larry's very comfortable with his mom. There's a possibility that Larry's mom could take a couple hours or, during the day so Lucy can work. I mean, I just think it needs to be explored. I don't know what the relationship is between Lucy and Larry's mom or Lucy and Lisa's and Larry's mom. So I'm with Rhonda. We don't have enough information, but we can explore them all.
Right. But like in all of our cases, we have to explore those things. We don't have the information until we get to the issue. And now you're right, we'd have to explore how would that look, and maybe before proposing it to the group, understand what Lucy thinks about that as a solution. As the facilitator, do you bring it up to Lucy first, or do you raise it with the group? I mean, these are difficult dynamics.
I mean, I agree with you, but with COVID, that's like a whole nother ball on top of this. I mean, I think they had these issues anyway, other than aftercare, but aftercare doesn't always work. What about when one's sick? Is the fact that to stay home from school to homeschool as opposed to going to school, I mean, those are definitely medically and COVID related issues. Not in the normal course of it.
How do parents in the COVID cases that are there today address that issue? Because if they're living in Broward, they're not going because it's all going to be online. But in Miami,
they haven't opened up yet.
Right. Well, Miami is in the we'll see. But some parents are saying even with we'll see, they could open and they may have immune compromised people around them saying, can't do it.
I think we're going to see COVID act as a basis for more and more dysfunction or need to have agreement. I mean, we have college kids that are going to be learning virtually. Some parents are going to say, they shouldn't go back, and they shouldn't be in their apartment with their friends. They should stay here and learn virtually. Other parents may want to normalize their experience more. There's financial implications to all of that. So this COVID issue is acting as a big catalyst for a lot of new decision making that folks are going to have to make, either intact families and families that are already going through or have been divorced. This is just the tip of the iceberg that we've raised here.
And I saw that Bette and Jeff had raised their hands. Bette, did you want to go ahead?
Well, what I was saying, this obviously is not a situation where you just let it go crazy and, let the partner and the ex-husband get together and say all the things they've been wanting to say, pre-COVID. I think that the facilitator has a lot of work to do before this would take place, and probably be at the first meeting, the only meeting of them together, if you will, because I would not allow the two people to be there by themselves without some observation. But before that, I think the facilitator needs to meet with the ex-husband and really find out what his concerns are, and if there may be some other concerns other than Lisa's inability to make a proper peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I don't know.
She only likes peanut butter, no jelly. That's the problem.
But if he could understand that with all the money that they're saving from camp, Amazon could arrive every day at the door with a surprise for these kids that would, keep them occupied for, the better part of the day. Think of how much money they would be saving, and all of the things that they could get that, they would need and could travel back and forth between houses. There's a lot of positives about it to sort of put forward to everybody.
Yeah.
A lot of learning and a lot of potential healing.
Other hands up.
But you're not, the thing is that if it's homophobia, you're not going to heal it at this juncture.
Helen Stein has her hand up. Helen, let's hear from you.
Yeah, so I have two comments. One sort of piggybacks on what you were saying, because it took a turn. I know this was a real case and you had real legal issues and all that, and mental health, the whole team was needed. But this conversation took a turn into like sort of a micromanaging of parenting matters. And my first question was, wait a minute, can married couples go to collaborative? I mean, can I rule in my discussions? Because I might like that. And secondly, interestingly, because of the way this turned, what you're saying about, the Larry talking to his lawyer or wherever, or either one of them reaching out, it could work out that way. Just sort of a conversation that turns into more of a communication coaching discussion about, these are critical conversations that there's no right or wrong answer, but encouraging and providing the confidence and helping choose the words that they either one might want to use in a critical conversation between them. Sounds like, maybe a good coach, just by way of where this turned, but any one of the people on the team could have had that single conversation with one person and make a big difference.
Mm-hmm. You created a great idea, which is that we set up collaborative process for married couples, because a lot of couples, you're right, are dealing
another
with
revenue stream.
I don't see why.
That was brilliant.
Because I think that just as many people may decide to divorce, but I think there are families that if you could intervene at the right time, the outcome would be different.
Yeah,
I agree.
It's much of a service.
I know Jeff Wasserman also had his hand up. Jeff?
Yeah, let me unmute. Building on what Bette has said, I think it's up to the facilitator to establish where Larry is coming from. Is it a bias that you're not going to get around as far as the collaborative process is concerned? or is there a real concern in connection with Lisa's ability to take care of the children? And my suggestion would be, in building on what Bette has said, offer to Larry that Lisa would be able to take care of the children in his house for a short period of time. And at the same time, Larry's mother would be able to go to Lucy's house and take care of the children at Lucy's house for a short period of time until everybody has gotten back to, okay, there really isn't an issue here. Larry's going to have his mom back at his house and Lisa's going to be back at Lucy's house.
That's another interesting alternative.
I think one thing we've realized very importantly about this case is the absolute need for a facilitator in this particular dynamic. You know, every issue that we've hit on really has come back to having the facilitator work with the parties and help with these issues. Just shows you that the team is important in the case. The whole team.
And notice that it wasn't only the facilitators that came up with the ideas, and it really is important for all of us to work as a united front, because all of us are literally against the issues at hand. It's not a matter of each one, quote unquote, driving in someone else's lane. It's a matter of being able to option build among the entire team and presenting it in a constructive and effective way to the clients. And by emulating that behavior, that allows for them to see constructive behavior that's being modeled and constructive communication that's being modeled.
We also have to applaud this couple because they returned to the process to resolve their issue. And so, you know, that shows you that the initial process worked for them. And so that's to be commended as well. Even though it's a made up story, it's something we would focus on.
But I really think that the notion of COVID busting for families in general might be perfect for collaborative.
Yes.
So if you have a problem with the COVID situation, you don't know how to solve it, come spend an afternoon with the COVID busting team. And
well, we are the COVID busting team, all of us. It was like a little
Yeah.
COVID busting think tank. And if anybody has any issues that come up in their cases, we can do it in this format and option build and create solutions. I mean, some that came up today, we had ourselves in preparing hadn't thought of.
they were amazing. I like
Yeah.
Jeff's idea too of swapping people.
Yes. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Great.
we have a lot of creative thinkers here. So this was wonderful, everybody. We thank you so much for coming. Does anybody have anything further they want to address or comment on? If not, we'll close this chapter of COVID Busters and hope we'll have another one.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all for
Thank you.
attending.
Thank you for attending.
Bye.
Be well, everyone.
Be
safe.
well.
Be well, be safe.